And my
Yeah.
younger child who's trans is very stealth. And so I try not to like talk about them a whole lot so that I don't out them.
Yeah.
They came out before I did. Like, they came out at 3 years
Wow.
old. Yeah. And
Wow.
they were very like understood exactly who they were without any, there was no doubts for them whatsoever. And they just had no problem telling us right off the bat that this is who I am, this is how you'll refer to me, and that is that.
Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex, and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. If you like what we do and want to make a contribution, you can become a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. Now, join us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance, and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I am a cis queer woman, and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I have a conversation with Dean Rasmussen, a life coach who is passionate about empowering the LGBTQ2S community. Dean uses he, they pronouns. He is a trans man, but they also resonate with the labels transmasculine, genderqueer, and non-binary. Find out what that means to Dean in this episode. We also talk about being a non-binary parent, separating the role of nurturer from gender, experiencing dysphoria in pregnancy, gender assumptions and how we are perceived, how testosterone can affect attraction, and the freedom that can come from trying out names and pronouns. It was recorded on the 17th of June 2021. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Dean Rasmussen.
Hi, Dean, and tell me about your gender experience. You have given me quite a few labels, so go for it.
Yeah, so I guess like simply I'm a trans man, but in so many ways that just doesn't encapsulate who I am. Like, so a lot of times I'll say that I'm trans masculine, and I also really like the label genderqueer, and non-binary sort of fits. I mean, I'm very much more the trans masculine end, but I also just would like to not believe that gender exists, so then I like to use non-binary as well.
Yeah, that really stood out to me because most of the people I've spoken to, obviously, I'm not going to say most people because who knows that, but most of the people I've spoken to who are more like on the binary end of being trans, like trans
Hmm.
men that I've spoken to as well, they would be, yeah, like I say, very binary rather than non-binary. So it's really
Right.
interesting to me to hear you refer to like saying that non-binary fits you as well. So how do
Right.
you feel those fit together, being a trans man and being non-binary?
I think because I would like to just like not see gender exist at all. I wish that gender just didn't exist. And as much as I know that I am a man, I am just not typical. And I mean, I lived for 40 years and experienced life for 40 years as a woman. So
Mm.
that really shapes who I am. And so
Hmm.
just being on the opposite end of the binary just doesn't fit.
Yeah. So you mentioned having lived as a woman for 40 years. When did you come out? Is it a fairly recent thing?
Yeah, so trying to think of dates here now. So it's been 4 years since I first, as an adult, realized that I was definitely a trans guy. Looking back, I know that there was definitely signs for me, and that's not always the case for everyone, but there was signs for sure. But
Hmm.
they just didn't really make sense. Like in the media and things like that, I had heard of trans women, so I knew that trans women were a thing. I had
Hmm.
no idea that trans men were a thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, about 4 years ago, a woman that I was dating at the time just out of the blue asked me if I was transgender. And I said,
Hmm.
no, no. But in my head, I was like, yes, I'm definitely trans. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's where it kind of all started as realizing. And then it wasn't until probably 6 months later that I changed my name and started coming out a bit more to other people.
Hmm. Yeah. You said there were signs when you were growing up. So did you have some sort of idea of your own difference in, like, from what other people were going through, or most other people, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, one thing for sure I remember, I mean, first of all, I just very much, like, had the freedom to be quite tomboy, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Hmm.
So I was able to be as boyish as I wanted to be. I was able to keep my hair short and wear boys' clothes and things like that. But I remember being, like, quite young and wondering, like, why can't I stand up to pee? Why don't I have a penis? There should be a penis there, and I should be
Mm.
able to stand up to pee just like my brother can. It made no sense to me.
Mm.
So there was, like, just things like that. And then I remember, like, playing make believe games and, you know, being always playing the boy role, and that just always felt really good for me. And
Mm.
never questioning that that was different than most of the other girls that I knew.
Hmm.
And being mistaken for a boy never upset me, never bothered me.
Yeah. Wow. And you mentioned as well, you have quite a big family. And
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. And you have, in fact, carried five of your children yourself.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. So that's really interesting, as a perspective as well, because
right,
identifying more with the masculine side of, I don't know, identity, I suppose.
right.
But it's something that you've always, you always wanted, like, a big family? Have you always considered yourself like a
Yeah,
parent in that role? And
yeah,
what
like,
does
as
that
a
mean to
kid.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, so as a kid, I always said, "Oh, I'm gonna have a dozen kids." That was always,
Hmm.
and being a mom was the only thing that I ever wanted. I ever knew for sure that I
Hmm.
wanted, and that it was the one thing, one part of my identity that I knew made sense, until I realized I was trans, and then all of a sudden that didn't make sense anymore. And that was
Yeah.
something that really took me a while to make sense of,
Mm.
that, how can I be a man if I'm a mom? And being a
Mm.
mom was such a huge, I mean, it was my everything. It was my
Hmm.
entire identity was wrapped up in being a mom. And so that
Mm.
definitely took me a bit of time to realize that, like, I just had such different ideas of what dads were, and
Hmm.
and which is interesting because I grew up with a dad who, did all the cooking and cleaning, and it wasn't I didn't grow up in a typical
Hmm.
household, but I think still, even then, like, mom was also still the nurturer. Like, even though
Mm.
my dad maybe did different roles in the house than what typical dads may have, my mom was still the nurturer for sure. And for
Hmm.
me, that's who I was. So I couldn't understand how I could be a mom and be a man.
Hmm.
And I started working with like a transgender, like a peer counselor, and they really helped me to spend some time just reflecting and getting to know other dads, like single dads and gay dads, and just different dads, and realizing that, oh, we're no different. Like, I'm still the same parent that I always was. Just the label mom just didn't fit anymore. And so
Hmm.
now all our kids call me Ren, which is a really common term for non-binary parents.
Ah, okay. Oh, I didn't
Hmm.
know that term. That's cool.
Mm.
Nice to have learnt it. Yeah, it's interesting. Do you find that you had to maybe unpick the role, as in mother or nurturer, from
Mm.
gender, or like that part of things?
Yeah, I really had to, like, dissect it and pick it apart, and
Hmm.
realize where my own like, generalizations and stereotypes were coming in, as far
Mm.
as what I saw a mom was compared to what I saw a dad was.
Hmm.
And once
Hmm.
I was able to, I have a friend who's a stay-at-home dad, and I have other friends, like, I have friends who are gay, who are dads, and realizing that, oh, like, they're nurturers as well. And realizing now, I really was never very, like, typically mom-like. I was really always more of a dad, just a more of a nurturing dad, which I just didn't understand.
Mm. Wow, that's so interesting. It's kind of mind blowing, really, isn't it? To
Mhm.
me, I mean, I'm like, wow, just trying to process it all. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, how did you fall into your parenting role? How was that journey for you?
Yeah, like, so when I first became a parent, you mean, or as I
Yeah.
transitioned? Yeah, so, like, looking back now, I realize that, being pregnant, I definitely had a lot of dysphoria, which I had no
Mm,
idea that that's what it was. But I also,
right.
I mean, there's plenty of women who don't enjoy being pregnant
Hmm.
and who have, pregnancy isn't always the most beautiful, blissful thing for everybody.
Mm,
And so it's hard to know if something's dysphoria, especially when you have no idea what dysphoria is, right?
right.
And yet I also loved being pregnant. Like, I loved carrying my children, and
Hmm.
it was, yeah, it was definitely a mix of feelings about it for sure.
Wow.
And yet now, thinking now, even if I had realized I was trans earlier on, there's a good chance that I still would have chosen to carry my children, because it's just
Hmm.
something that was really that just made sense for me, I guess.
Hmm. So, when you say you experienced dysphoria when you were pregnant, what did that show up as? What did that look like?
I think I just really felt like, just, I guess, kind of like a disconnect from my body, and like it just didn't feel quite right. It
Mm,
wasn't like I don't have, I don't know, dysphoria is so different. It's so hard to speak on because it's so different for every trans person.
hmm.
And I sometimes worry that, like, just if I share my experience with what dysphoria is like for me, sometimes that becomes like oh, this is what dysphoria is then for every
Mm,
trans person, and it
hmm.
certainly isn't that. That's just not the case. I would say, like, my dysphoria isn't as extreme
Hmm.
as some trans people for sure, and
Hmm.
maybe just it's just different in different ways. But I remember, especially like with nursing, with trying to nurse my babies, that was extremely difficult.
Hmm.
And I always really wanted to, but it just didn't feel right. And so that
Mm,
I remember, like, so now thinking back, like, I definitely had a lot of dysphoria during that time.
hmm.
But again, I just didn't understand that that's what it was. I just
Mm,
remember it just feeling really uncomfortable, and yet wanting it so bad, like wanting so badly for to be able to,
yeah.
but just not being it. Like, just it just was such a, I don't know. Am I allowed to swear on here?
Hmm.
Just such a mind fuck. Honestly, it was
Yeah.
just such a mind fuck, right? It just didn't make sense.
Wow. I bet it
Yeah.
sounds really conflicting. Yeah.
It was, yeah, it was
Mm,
incredibly conflicting.
hmm. So you have, well, you've got more kids now with your current partner. Is that
Yeah,
how it
so
is
my
at the
partner and
moment?
I together have 8 kids. I have
Amazing.
2 adult kids, and then we have 6 that live at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we
Wow.
have a busy house.
Yeah. Sounds it. Amazing.
Mhm.
And two of your kids are also trans. Is that
That's
right?
right, yeah. My 22-year-old is non-binary, and then one of
Hmm.
my younger ones is also trans. And
Interesting.
my
Yeah.
younger, child who's trans is very stealth, and so I try not to, like, talk about them a whole lot so that I don't out them.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely, like, they came out before I did. Like, they came out at 3 years
Wow.
old. Mhm. Yeah, and
Wow.
they were very, like,
Hmm.
understood exactly who they were without any, there was no doubts for them whatsoever, and they just had no problem telling us right off the bat that this is who I am, this is how you'll refer to me, and that is that. And that was at
Mm,
3 years old. Like, it was
that's
amazing.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing to see how, how they were so sure of who they were, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. And what about your other child?
And then my 22-year-old, we kind of, I guess, started to understand our gender around the same time as each other, so for them, it's been the last few years as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so they were assigned female at birth, and for them, they just are just agender. They just don't, gender doesn't fit them whatsoever. Like, they
Mm,
would, I suppose, like, they would appear more. on the mask of center side of things, but nothing man, woman, none of that fits for them. They just like gender just doesn't exist and never has existed for them. They've never understood what gender meant as
Mm.
far as like for themselves.
Mm. Does not compute. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly, not at all.
Reminds me of the
Mm.
t-shirt design I've seen. It says error 404, gender not found or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
genius.
exactly.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
amazing to go through a gender journey with your child, at the same
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been really interesting.
Yeah. Do you feel like you supported each other a lot and learned from each other? And how was that? Because obviously your gender journeys sound very different.
They're similar and different at the same time, and yeah, I think like I've learned so much from both of my kids, for sure. I mean, I think I learn from all
Mm.
of my kids all the time, but
Mm.
yeah, I mean, even just thinking of my younger child and just realizing with them how much body parts just do not how much you
Make
just
a
can't
gender.
associate body parts with gender, like it just
Yeah.
doesn't even, because they are so completely their gender, irregardless of
Mm.
what their body parts are. And so
Mhm.
that's really helped me, I think, like having my younger child has really helped me to like just fully embrace and accept myself
Mhm.
because I completely embrace and accept them. So of course
Yeah.
it really helps me to embrace and accept myself. Right, and
Mhm.
I think also it helped me to realize some of the watching them grow up.
Mhm.
I think it's helped me to see that, oh yeah, I remember feeling those ways myself at those ages as well. Um,
Ah.
it's helped me
Hindsight,
to
yeah.
remember that, yeah, exactly, right? And then yeah,
Mhm.
with my 22-year-old, I mean they have taught me so much about all gender stuff and everything to do with being non-binary, and because it takes a bit to like stop thinking about the binary when I think
Mm.
especially when you're older, we have such binary thinking, and
Yeah.
such stereotypical gender thinking, and so they really have helped me throughout the last few years to realize that, oh no, you're thinking that way about gender because that's just the
Mm.
stereotype, that's just the generalization, and so they really have helped me to just realize how much of it is just all societal and stuff like that.
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And also I think what a lot of people connect, which is not necessarily connected or actually is not connected at all, is
Right.
the body parts and gender, you
Mhm.
know. So, because yeah, there are women with the penis and there are men with the vagina and
Yeah, exactly.
everything and anything in between. So,
Yeah.
but a lot of people just can't separate those things out, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, and I
Mm.
think for myself, I mean, I was definitely one of those people for a long time,
Mm.
but and then,
Mm.
like I said, like, watching my younger child grow up and realizing just how much they are who they are, irregardless of whatever body parts they
Mm.
have, has
Yeah.
really helped me to just see that, "Oh, it's the same for me." Like, I am
Yeah.
who I am, I know who I am,
Mm.
regardless of, what the world tells me because of whatever parts I happen to have.
Mhm. Yeah. Body parts do not make a gender. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where does the gender queer fit in for you? Why does that resonate with you?
So I think, I mean, I really, and I would like to embrace it more. It's definitely hard sometimes because there's such a thing with, some days being able to be assumed as a cis male. But for the most part, like I often think about the fact that, had I been assigned male at birth, I would be much more femme, I guess, much more feminine in certain ways, and so that's where I kind of
Mm.
think of where gender queer kind of fits in. As much as I know, like I am a guy,
Mhm.
but I like to play with whatever that happens to mean a little more than
Mm.
what, I don't want to just be in that, like, you are in this on this side of this masculine end of this line, and you have to stay right there, and
Mm.
that just doesn't fit for me.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. How do you feel about the term gender fluid?
For me, I don't personally that doesn't personally resonate for me.
Hmm.
And again, like, gender fluid, I think, is one of those terms that is so can have so many different meanings for different people,
Yeah.
and someone else might look at me or might know me and think, "Oh, no, that makes sense for you." But for me, it's just not a label
Hmm.
that resonates for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's an interesting thing where
Mm.
certain labels just start to, like, feel like they fit us, and other ones just no, it just doesn't quite.
Totally.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think as well when you look at certain words and definitions of words, kind of like labels, but other words as well, they have a certain meaning that are
Mhm.
that is assigned to them. But still, it can be such an individual thing about how it's really defined and how it what it
Yeah.
really means to a person. And
Mhm.
especially with gender labels, I've been finding that a lot because I've spoken to so many non-binary people, and no two are experiencing being non-binary in the same way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, I think a lot of people might think, "Oh, yeah, I've now learned what non-binary is, so now I know
Yeah.
what that is." But I was like, actually, we have no idea,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you need
Yeah.
to find this out from a person, what it means to them. So
Mhm.
that's why I always ask. Well, I'm not sure I've actually gotten around to asking it more. Like, but normally I say, "How do you identify? And what does that mean to you?" Like,
Right.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because, I remember listening to one of your previous podcasts, and I don't remember who it was now, but a trans woman,
Hmm.
and how for her, she very much like she said, like, "I am a woman. I am a
Hmm.
woman first, transgender second." I don't
Hmm.
like, I'm kinda paraphrasing right now, but and how for
Yeah.
myself, I very much, like, hang on to the fact that I am a trans man. Like,
Hmm.
as much as I know who I am and I know that I'm a guy, but like I
Hmm.
said, I feel so often like if I am just a man, that just kind of erases 40 years of
Mm.
life experiences for myself, right? So for me
Yeah.
personally, I would always rather be known that I'm a trans man, as long as it's safe. Sometimes it's not safe. Sometimes you just need to be
Yeah.
seen as,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
as one as a
Totally.
gender.
Mhm.
But as long
Mhm.
as it's safe, I much prefer to be known as a trans man
Mhm.
because it just seems to, like, encapsulate much more of who I am
Mhm.
rather than just, you know, to be assumed as a cis man. It just doesn't really
Mhm.
fit for me personally. So it's so interesting how we all have such different experiences and what
Yeah,
feels good
absolutely.
for some and
Yeah.
doesn't for others. And
Mhm. Mhm. Was it Evie? Evie's episode?
yes, yes, that's who it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that
Yeah.
stood out for me as well, actually, because she's so sure in her womanhood. I've
Yeah.
mentioned this before in other episodes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whereas for me, even now, I'm a bit like, okay, gender. What is it? What is my gender? I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And it's
love
like
so much of what
woman,
she said.
you know. Yeah, yeah. And I know, and I just feel it like for me, I'm not even that attached to being a woman, to be fair. And I'm a bit like, what does that
Right.
even mean to me? I don't know
Yeah.
anymore. Whereas she's like, this is who I am, and this is like,
Mhm.
yeah. And I love
Yeah.
sort of hearing her certainty in that. Yeah, but I
Mhm.
mean, she's had to fight for that, and
Right.
really, and she still is, I guess. She's recovering from surgery now, which she speaks
Mhm.
about quite openly. Yeah, but that stood out for me as well.
Mhm.
Mm,
Made me stop and realize, like, yeah, it's so true that the trans people are so much more aware of our genders and
mm-hmm,
have so much more surety really and understanding than
mm-hmm.
so many cis people because you just don't think about it. You don't ever have to
Yeah,
think about it,
exactly.
right? Where
Yeah.
we have thought about it so much,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and we
Yeah.
know it's coming from this place of, like, I guess speaking for myself anyway, it's coming from this place of, like, okay, this doesn't make sense, and
Mm,
yet I can no longer deny it,
mm-hmm.
right? Where for cis people, you don't ever have to have those thoughts or anything.
Those conversations with yourself,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm Yeah, there was a really good meme I saw the other day, which is like, how do you know you're a man or a woman? Like asking cis people that question.
Hmm.
You can't refer to body parts, and you can't refer to what else was it? There was something else anyway, but
Right.
it
I
took
think
like
you shared it
some
on
of
your
the.
Facebook, I think,
I
right?
did,
I think,
yeah,
yeah, I was going to say, I remember
yeah,
seeing that and thinking, yeah, wow, that's really
yeah.
powerful.
And I think that it like just it rocks the foundations of like identity, I guess, and also
Right.
societal structures of what society's
Hmm.
built on. Because like if everyone started asking themselves these questions, then we would have like gender anarchy basically, which
Yes,
is like
exactly.
I think that's a revolution worth having, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah. But it's like I've also spoken to people who are like, yeah, what is gender and what is my gender and how do I feel in my manhood, womanhood, whatever. And some
Mhm.
people have come to the conclusion like, oh yeah, I'm cis. That's who I am.
Right.
So it's not like just because you're questioning, you're all of a sudden going to, be converted or something
Yeah,
ridiculous like that,
exactly.
which is what
Yeah,
people seem to be
absolutely.
worried about,
Yeah, it's
right?
such a fear of that, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it's been interesting for myself as a parent to realize, like, how different I'm raising my kids now
Mm,
that I, take gender out of things so much. And,
mm,
there's so many things where we are like, boys will be boys, and this is how girls should be, and, or,
mm,
things like that. And realizing as a parent, like, it's completely shifted the
mm-hmm,
way that I parent
mm-hmm,
because, like, we parent our kids as just as human beings, just as kids,
mm-hmm.
rather than parenting the boys a certain way or the girls a certain way. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's been really fascinating too. But then
Mm,
realizing how much our world still is so gendered.
yeah.
And it's interesting listening to sometimes to some of our younger kids have conversations with their peers and
Mm-hmm.
telling their peers that, like, that doesn't make any sense. You can't say that about boys or about girls. Like, things like, boys can't have long hair or, things like
Mm,
that. Or, uh, you know,
totally.
so many of our boys have had longer hair than our girls have ever had. And
Mm,
and our boys love to paint their nails and, they all like to wear whatever they want to wear and things like that. And
yeah. Yeah. And that's very much a thing though, because when you start questioning all this, you see what's going on in society,
mhm.
like how binary it all is. Like boys
Yeah.
can play with this and not with this.
Yeah,
Same for
exactly.
girls. They can wear these colors and not those colors. They can,
Mhm.
decorate their bodies in this way, but not that way.
Mhm.
Yeah, just all the
Yeah.
things, really. Yeah, crazy. Yeah. So, what have the last few years been like for you, living as more of your authentic self?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of changes the last few years for sure. So next
Mm-hmm.
month it'll be 2 years already since I've been on testosterone, which is unbelievable
Mm.
to think it's been that long already. It's
Wow.
interesting how when you first get on testosterone, it feels like, oh, nothing's ever going to change and like nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden you look back and it's like, wow, like it's been 2 years now almost. And
Mm.
um, it's it's interesting though. So anytime that I go out by myself now, I pretty much get read as male, and I get sirred and things like that. And but when my partner and I go out together, because my partner signed female at birth as well, and still presents very, um, I mean, I guess I would say, like, presents kind of in the middle or whatever, but is still very obviously read as female, but
Mm-hmm.
very queer looking female. So we both just get read as lesbians really together. And so when we're
Mm.
together, we often get called ladied, or get ladied, or we get mammed, or and it's really interesting just how people,
Ah.
just seeing those shifts in people, where if I'm by myself, I'm always read as male. But when I'm with my partner,
Wow.
suddenly we're seen as, well, I guess there must be two lesbians maybe. And yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And then even I think when I'm with my kids, because I just have this different way about me that's not seen as typically male, because I am so much more
Mm.
nurturing with them, and then just like my body language, I'm just like, use my hands a lot, and like there's just things that most
Yeah.
men don't do compared to how most women interact and stuff. So it's
Yeah.
interesting going out and about
Mm.
in the world and the different ways that I get read, depending on
Mm.
how I'm, who I'm with and how I'm presenting myself, and which is quite interesting.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, but also I
That's
find like,
fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, and I find it's interesting though because sometimes when I'm out and I am just seen as like if I'm with my kids and I'm seen as just their dad or something, it's always kind of like weird for me too because I'm like, well, that's not who I am either. And it's
Yeah.
quite,
Yeah.
it's quite fascinating sometimes though to like, bring up like one of my pregnancy stories with somebody who maybe doesn't know me and see their
Yeah.
like reaction is just like, what? And I have to do a bit of a double take, and that's kind of fun
Yeah.
to
I
do that
bet.
with people. And
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, but it's interesting too how being on testosterone now has given me a little more freedom to just feel more able to kind of just express myself in however I want and not worry so much about, making sure that I'm trying to be like uber masculine because that's just really not
Mm.
who I am. And
Yeah.
so that's really helped me to be more comfortable to just be me rather than trying to be a certain type of person, guy, whatever that is.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm still pondering about you being perceived or how you're perceived really differently when you're out and about with different people.
Yeah, it's
That's kind of
fascinating.
mind-boggling.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other labels you used was pansexual. Is that
Mhm.
something you've always, well, not always been, because I guess you kind of are. That's kind of who we are, isn't it?
Right,
I mean,
yeah,
I'm pansexual as well, but you might
right.
discover it at some
Don't always
point and then
realize.
think, ah,
Exactly.
yeah, totally,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
so when I was 21, I was married to a man and had my first 2 kids, and then at 25, all of a sudden, I was, falling for a friend of mine and realizing that, "Oh, shit, I guess I'm gay." And I really, like, hung on to the label gay. I never called myself a lesbian, never really understood until I realized I was trans, why the label lesbian didn't feel good for me.
Mm, yeah.
Realizing once I'm trans that, of course, that made sense for me.
Mm,
Um, and then so at 25, yeah, I came out as gay at that point, but then lived in a really small conservative town, and it was really hard to be openly gay there. And I ended up going to church because I was looking for community, and that was the only place I knew where to find it in my small town. And I had
mm,
no idea at that time how the church felt about homosexuality. And
mm,
so I went to church, and then I ended up going like for some conversion therapy and for a deliverance so they could pray the gay out of me. And I was
mm,
really excited about that at the time because I was really like, okay, yeah, if this is something that can be fixed, then that would probably feel really good to just
mm,
get it fixed so that I could just go about being normal again, I guess, really, for lack of a better word.
mm,
And so I did all of that, and then I just stayed. I was just a single mom for almost 8 years, I think. And
mm.
then I decided that I didn't want to just be a single mom anymore, and so I got married again and had my three more babies and had 3 of them in 2.5 years. So I was very busy.
Wow.
I kept
Yeah.
myself very busy. And then baby number 6, I miscarried. And
Oh.
so I think for me, that was a real catalyst in, like, it just kind of, like, woke me up and made me realize, like, "Okay, what am I doing here?" This is
Mm,
I suddenly realized how much I was just throwing myself into this busyness of being a parent and not having to really focus on who I was.
mhm,
And so then at that time, again, totally felt that again I was just absolutely 100% gay again. And so then I got involved with women again. And
mhm.
then when I went on testosterone, once I realized I was trans and I went on testosterone, my gender doctor at the time told me that, and I'd heard this from so many people, that once you go on testosterone, there's a very good chance that you'll start to realize that your sexuality may shift again.
Mhm.
And that's when I did realize that, and I realized, like, looking back all along, that I was absolutely pansexual. but
Mhm.
I had so much more dysphoria being with men because as soon as I was with men, I was seen as a woman. And so
Mm.
that's so much of it was just dysphoria related. And then
Mm.
also it just didn't really it never really quite fit being with like a cisgender heterosexual man
Mhm.
because then I was being perceived as a cisgender heterosexual woman. You know, it's
Mhm.
very different all of a sudden realizing of myself as a gay man with other gay men and just a completely different it's just completely different. I don't really know how to explain it beyond that, but it's
Mm.
just a very different just being a queer person with other queer people is
Mhm.
totally different. And so now, yeah, I fully realize that I have always been pansexual.
Mm.
And and for me, like I really like the label pansexual. It just seems
Mhm.
to really feel feel good for me.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel that, I mean, how does it compare with the term bisexual to you? Why does that not
Yeah,
resonate with you?
I
Yeah.
think only because, and I know this isn't true, but bisexual just feels more binary.
Mhm.
And as
Yeah.
much as I know that that is not true,
Mhm.
that's still how it resonates for me. And so I
Mhm.
think that that's what it is. I think that's why I feel better with the label pansexual compared to
Mhm.
bisexual, even though really I know they're interchangeable. And I know for,
Yeah.
different people they prefer one over the other. And I think for me that it really is just that it just feels so much more a gendered term, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel quite similar about it. To me, pansexual feels more inclusive in a way.
Right.
Although,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Although
Although
I
I
have
know that
many,
it's not
yeah,
like it.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And I have a lot of bisexual friends who are just, they just fancy people. It's not
Yeah,
like, oh, just men are
exactly.
just women. It's not
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
So, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Tell me about the pronouns you use.
Yeah, so I use both they, them, and he, him pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
In queer spaces, I definitely prefer they, them pronouns. I feel like it
Mm-hmm.
just really embodies who I am more so rather than he,
Mm-hmm.
him pronouns. I just feel, yeah, I feel so much more seen with they, them pronouns. And yet out in the
Mm.
world, when I get he, himmed or get sirred or things like that, that also feels really good. But
Wow.
amongst my friends and amongst, queer people and most of my, immediate family, everybody uses they, them pronouns, and that just
Mm.
feels really good for me as far as just
Mm-hmm.
fully encompassing who I am as a person.
That's so cool. Yeah. Yeah. I like the different preferences, quote unquote,
Mhm.
because that's a discussion in itself, isn't
Right,
it?
yeah.
But like different preferences in different spaces.
Mhm. Yeah. It's been fascinating to learn all those things about myself, and so much of it
Yeah, I
is just
bet.
trial and error, right?
Yeah,
That's another
absolutely.
thing I think is so
Like
important
trying it
for.
on and
Yeah,
hearing it back, isn't it?
exactly.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and that's
Amazing.
one thing I think too, just to add that in there too, that, trying out names and pronouns and stuff like that, it doesn't always feel immediately good and comfortable
Mhm.
because it's especially if you've lived for so many years, using a certain name or pronouns and things like that.
Mhm.
Sometimes it does take, but there's this different feeling of like, that feels really good even though it feels kind of weird right now.
Mhm.
and it
Mhm.
and it just does slowly start to feel more and more comfortable and natural and
Yeah, that makes
yeah,
so much
yeah.
sense, really. Something about the conversation that is currently out, which is the panel discussion about higher education. One of the students, Ro, was saying how they tried out different names basically, and
Mm,
they posted on forums and shared images with people saying, "What name do you think would suit me?" And then they picked one, and then they heard it back from another person, and they were like, oh no, not this one."
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
almost like
exactly.
having it reflected back gives you a lot of clarity about
Mhm.
it as well, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you
Yeah.
have that immediate like, no, no, that doesn't feel
Hmm.
right." And other
Yeah.
times it's like, "Okay, that feels weird, but not bad. Still good, just
Mm.
it's gonna take a little time." And I think
Hmm.
that's kind of how I felt with my name and even pronouns. Getting used to them where it feels so much better, but also a
Hmm.
little, "That's kinda strange, that doesn't sound quite."
Hmm.
It doesn't sound wrong, it just sounds different because it's not what you're used
Mm.
to. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I love that. Is there something you would like to add or talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I think really I just always like to encourage people to kind of just toss gender aside and just it's an interesting thing, especially working with trans people, because I know that many trans people, gender is important to
Mm.
trans people. You know, like
Mhm.
and I fully understand that. It's an interesting thing where I don't believe in gender. I wish that gender didn't exist. But I also realize how important it is for so many of like my trans peers to be able to know and to hold on to gender for themselves. But
Mhm.
I also work with a lot of trans people who are very trans masculine people mostly who are not typical, not not your typical like manly man type of person, right?
Mhm.
And I think for them it really helps them to realize that we don't have to put ourselves in this box of what it means to be a man. We get to define that.
Mm.
And same for trans women and just women in general, women and men, that everyone should be able to just define what that means for themselves rather than trying to fit
Mhm.
into this box that our society is trying to tell us what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman or any of those things.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing your
Yeah,
story with
thank you
me.
for having me.
You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Dean, where you can also read the transcript. And you can find Dean on their website, everydayanomalycoaching.ca, as well as on Instagram and Facebook at Everyday Anomaly Coaching. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com, on social media, and on YouTube. Again, if you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open minded. I think we've covered a lot, so
Yeah, I feel like we did in like
amazing.
all roundabout ways and
Yeah, I like the way it sort of meandered. So
yeah,
that was good.
absolutely.
I like that. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
How do you feel? Are you happy with how it went and what you covered or what we
I
talked
think
about?
so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
It's always hard to know
cool.
because you just chit chat back and forth and then
Yeah,
yeah.
well, it is pretty casual. Like it is kind
Yeah,
of just a
which is
conversation.
nice. Mhm.
Just a conversation that everyone else can hear, basically.
Yeah, exactly.